Well, hello there, GingerGM viewers, etc. I would like to now take a look at a game that I played from the European Club Cup, and probably one of my best ever results ever, and it was a victory against Gelfand. And this was, I used the Dutch defence in this game to get my victory, which has probably served me the best against top players. I mean, I've had some other notable victories against some 2700, 2600 players in the Dutch. And I think it's a really good way to throw these strong players off guard. I mean, when I was preparing for the game in the morning, I was quite tempted to play the King's Indian defence, but then I thought, well, hang on a minute, why not play the Dutch? You know, I'm probably like one of the experts in the world at the Dutch. My opponent maybe doesn't know it as well as the King's Indian, so let's test the opening up. I've got a lot of faith in the opening, as you can see, because if I'm willing to play it against Gelfand, that means I'm not worried about any of the lines, and I really think that it's quite hard for White to find an advantage, and I know the positions quite well, so I thought there's no point messing about, let's just play the Dutch against Gelfand. And I also noticed when I was preparing briefly in the morning that he had some it seemed like Nigel Short scored quite well against Gelfand on the database. I don't know if this is true or not, but I saw some games where Nigel often picked rather offbeat openings and they worked out quite well, so I thought the Dutch would be a perfect opening to use against this very strong player. And okay, so we go straight into the opening, so all pretty standard starts, and we reach the main position of the castle's d6, when I was mainly looking at knight to c3, knight to e4 in the morning, just preparing this line, and I was concentrating on White taking on e4, which I think is the most critical line, but I've done a fair bit of work on this recently. I'm about to release a new book on the Dutch, which we're going to release through GingerGM. Those of you who bought the Dutch DVD through our website, only through our website, you'll get a copy of this for free, otherwise it'll be for sale for anyone else out there. But anyway, I was preparing this, but I still think this line's actually okay for Black. I haven't been able to find a convincing way for White to find an advantage in this line. I mean, you might be slightly better somehow, but it's not easy for White to prove anything. But instead, my opponent now played b4, and this is a move that tries to clamp down on the queen side and gain general space, and I think this is a pretty decent move actually, and I wouldn't be surprised if this will catch on a bit more. In the past against b4, I've always replied with knight to e4 when some sequence events, the sequence normally goes bishop to b2, a5, and here I've had a game where White's played b5, that allows me to play the rather annoying a4, and instead I think a3 was a move I was slightly more concerned about, when Black's probably still okay, but this pawn formation over on the queen side can be a little bit annoying for me. So I wanted to avoid this, so I played a5 straight away, and now of course White can't play a3 anymore, so he has to push his pawn on, and now these pawns can become a bit of a target. I mean, my general plan here was to put my pieces on good squares. I don't really want to allow White to play a4 because this shores up his queen side, so I always want to play a4 myself, because also this does rather keep the pawn on b5 stranded once I go a4, and I want to attack this pawn by the move c6 and then put pressure on this pawn on b5. Also, in some positions, the pawn on c4 can be a bit of a weakness after I go d5. Now generally in this line, the b4 variation, it's quite important to remember that d5 is often the move you rely on here rather than e5. d5 is the move to play. Now I'll tell you why d5 is the move. It just really attacks these pawns on c4 and b5. It's really the move you kind of aim for. Anyway, let's move on with the game. So my knight comes in the centre, bishop queen c2, bishop s6, so this is the best diagonal obviously for my bishop. Gelfand played bishop b2, and now I have a number of moves here, but I wanted to stop my opponent from playing a4 on his next move, so I played a4 myself. And of course this also makes it a little bit annoying for White to develop his knight on b1, because if this comes to c3 or even to d2, I can flick in a3, and this causes some problems for my opponent. So his development is maybe not ideal after this a4 move, but on the minus side my pawn on a4 could become a weakness. So now Gelfand played the move I expected, knight on fd2. I was also looking at knight to e1. I thought this is also quite sensible, the idea of going f3, but knight fd2. And I was quite good here to refrain from capturing on d2 and then playing something like e5, which should generally be the main idea in this kind of opening. But the problem with this variation is that his bishop's very strong and my queenside pieces are very tied down, so even though I achieve this e5 break, it doesn't really help me much. Rather than in the game, when I go d5, his bishop on g2 becomes quite a bad piece now because it's kind of caged in, and I stabilise my knight on e4, and his pieces just strike me as not being very well coordinated. So in actual fact, even though I'm sure my opponent is doing fine here, I was quite happy with my position at this point. My opponent played knight a3, and now I go c6, so I have ideas of chipping away at his pawn structure. Rook a b1, bishop d7. And around here, actually, I just, like, you know, because I'm playing Gelfand, he's a bit of a legend, an extremely strong player, I just kind of assumed that all his moves were making a lot of sense and they're the best moves on the board, and, you know, he was just playing with brilliant skill, well above my standard. But and you know, actually looking at the position, he's played very sensible moves, but certainly nothing to be scared of. And my position seems perfectly fine here. I mean, I was very comfortable, especially in a couple of moves' time. I think he should go e3 here at some stage to take control of the f4 square. But he continued rook fc1, moving a piece away from the king side. Now I do a bishop maneuver that's quite familiar with the French defence, bishop e8. This bishop now either comes out to g6 or h5, very good squares for my piece. And now my opponent played a mistake quite quickly, knight to f3. And after this, the fireworks start happening. This allows me to play f4, and as you can see by my rather overpowering diagrams here, my idea is just to go bishop g6, get that bishop on a great diagonal, or just to put pressure against the pawn on f2. So when I played this move f4, I went outside, get myself a cup of coffee, and I kind of realised at this point I had a very good position. In actual fact, I think my opponent is in serious trouble here already. If he takes on f4, then I just go bishop g6, and when the queen moves, I go bishop h4, and I'm going to take back on f4 my rook, or f2 is dropping as well, and his position is just going to crumble, completely crumbling. So he can't allow this this position. So you look at all my pieces; they're just flooding into his king side. So he moved his queen to d1. This gets out of the way of the diagonal. I took on g3, and now we can see that this pressure on the f-file is very useful to me, and his pieces on the queen side don't look very good over here because they're not really doing much. Now bishop g5 was my first, first fault, but I think he's fine after a series of captures, and then rook to c3. Very important move to play rook to c3. This stops me playing e3, and after this move he just wants to go bishop c1. So instead I just continue normal moves, bishop g6. My opponent now captures on c6, allows me to develop another piece, but his idea is to go knight b5 and try to activate his pieces on the queen side. So this is quite an interesting idea he's played here. Bishop to g5 was played, and now he played probably the only move, bishop to a3. And I had two tempting choices here. The move I played in the game, but I think also a very good option is just taking on c1. If he takes an f8, bishop to e3, and then after something like f takes e3, queen takes f8, it's clear to see I'm much better here. But I got carried away after bishop to a3 with a line which involves me sacrificing, and I couldn't resist playing it basically. I played rook f7, and now I assumed in the game he was pretty forced to take on g5. Otherwise there's too many horrible things happening to his position. I might even get a sack on g3 at some point. So my queen comes out, and now I think he has to take on e4 because f2 is too weak. D takes is the right move. So if I go bishop takes, he can flick in knight d6, which is awfully annoying. So D takes, and now his king side is incredibly weak. And when I played rook to f7, the main move I was concentrating on here was knight to d6. Now queen to e1 was played in the game, but this is really quite a passive move. e3 I go bishop to h5, which is very strong for me. So the main move I was concentrating was knight to d6 when I was planning, and this is why I played this rook to f7 move, I was planning just to go rook takes f2, and I thought this would give me a very dangerous attack, which I'll be very happy in my elements playing. The idea is after king takes, I go rook f8 check. You can't go to e1 because of e3 with mate, so he just has to go to g2 and then e3 anyway. Idea is rook to f2. devastating. So he's got to defend this by playing queen to g1. The idea, if I go rook to f2, then he gives up his queen. The queen takes f2, and this is one line here I was interested in. I thought I could take on f2 here, rook takes b7 and go h5, and I thought after king takes f2, this move would give me again probably a winning position. So I think this is the line I was more tempted to play, but I saw as a backup plan after queen to b1 I also had the simple bishop takes b1. When my opponent can't now, I'll take this bishop back to rook to f2, so he has to go rook to f1 and then bishop to f5, and I thought this would also give me a very good position, because look at the placement of his queen, and his king's very weak. So I was hoping to get this, but obviously Gelfand, being the player here he is, saw that this was very dangerous and thought his best chance laid in queen to e1. Okay, so now I win the exchange. Around here I was very nervous inside because I know I'm winning the game, and I really don't want to mess it up against such a class player as Gelfand. Rook to b1. And his main idea, yes, as the diagram shows, is go knight d6 and put his knight on e4, which is a very good square for the knight. So I avoided this by playing rook to f6. If his knight moves, and something on d4 will happen. King g2, and I thought, well, let's go caveman. No point messing about here. Straight for his king. Rook over here. And now my main threat here is to go queen to h5, and if he defends with something like queen to h1, then my queen comes back to f5, and it will eventually find its way into the h3 square. So he goes g4, and this sort of allows his queen to come to g3. And here it's quite strange. I mean, this is move 27, and when I played this last move of rook h6, I obviously saw that he had to go g4 here, and I had a bit of a brain sort of collapse here, because I was looking at my clock. I was getting nervous. I saw my opponent only had about 5 minutes here, but my time was getting quite low as well. 6-7 minutes, maybe a little bit more, can't really remember, but it was getting low. And I thought, well, against someone of this class, one thing I can't allow myself to do is get short of time. I cannot allow myself to run out of time. So my idea was, okay, I'm going to play a move instantaneously, try simplifying the position just to gain time on the clock. And after g4, I played the move knight to e7. This knight is ideas coming around to the king side over here and here, so I knew my opponent would have to swap off his bishop for this knight, and I thought, well, this helps me, it simplifies the position. But after g4 I have the incredibly simple knight takes d4, and I think the only way I can not explain this move is just nerves that I didn't play this move. It's a very easy win after knight takes queen f4, and this is something I'd normally spot 9 times out of 10, hopefully more even. And queen g3, queen takes d4 is just game over. And so anyway, I made things more interesting by playing knight to e7, and now he gets right back in the game with queen to g3, rook to d8, queen to e5. Move 30, I play queen to h4, he played queen to g3, queen to e7, queen to e5. And okay, I can take the draw, but this never really crosses my mind, because I realised if I played on it's very risky and I might not even be better. But how many times in chess do you get a chance to beat a player of Gelfand's quality? It's not often, and you know, if I lose, I lose. It's just one of those things. But I think you've got to be brave in chess, and you've got to go for it, you know. Otherwise, what's the point of playing? You know, you've got to try to win. So I just thought, right, let's roll the dice. Rook g6. And now, very complicated, c5, rook g5 takes h5. And this is my idea, to generally just try to mix the position up. And I can play against anyone in messy positions, so I'm not really scared who I play against. But of course, my opponent gets very active now. And after, in this position, it's just a complete mess. But again, we're both very short on time, and my opponent crumbles. I mean, he's down to his last minute here. I've got a couple of minutes left, and he just fell apart. I mean, I was thinking he'd probably play rook takes b7, most obvious move, when again it's a draw if I play queen to h4, because he has some perpetual with check. Let's just have a look at one line, knight to f7 check here, then knight to g5, with one vicious point being if rook takes g5, f takes g5, it's queen h3, king here, rook here, which looks like it could be strong. My opponent can now play queen to h6 check, a lovely little tactic which gives him a winning ending because he forces the queens off the board. So after rook takes b7, if my opponent had played this, I was actually going to keep rolling the dice with queen to f6 here, because I saw that, wow, this is a way to play for a win. I can play rook h3, queen h6 next move, and you know, I don't think I'm any better here, but it's you know, it's a messy position, so why not? But my opponent played queen to g3, and this allowed me to play queen to f6, and now he's in serious trouble, because if I can take this pawn, my queen can find some very good diagonals. So he took on g4, but now pretty simple finish. Rook h6. If he goes quick king to f3, queen takes d4 should be winning for me. He played f5, again short time, but after a little tactical exchange of this here check, he found himself in a losing position. If his king goes backwards at all, like king g1, I go rook takes d4, and I have rook to g4 check coming in. I mean, the important thing about this position is that I have time to move my rook, because he has no checks with his queen. So wherever his king goes, I'm going to have a mating attack. He tried maybe the sternest defence, king to h3, but instead of taking the pawn on d5, which is probably also very strong, rook to d5 finishes things off immediately, because my immediate threat is something like rook to h5 check, and queen to f3 check. These are my two threats. He can't stop both. He actually resigned here. One potential line which could have followed would have been something like rook to g1, queen here check, with the idea of the rook coming across, so he has to go king up, rook d4, and now rook g4. And now the easiest idea is just to simplify. Rook takes, queen takes, queen takes, king takes, and now just king s7 with a winning king and pawn ending. So obviously I was very happy with this. It was quite amusing because I'm so nervous through the game. I'm hiding it pretty well. I'm trying to be cool, and as soon as he resigned, I just fell into like a gibbering wreck basically. I mean, I was shaking. My hand, I couldn't put my hand out properly. He was very polite. He suggested one line, but I didn't really understand what he was saying because I was in another world. And then he said congratulations. So very nice of him to congratulate me. I mean, you don't get many players congratulating your opponent, do you, after a win? So that was incredibly nice of him. Seemed like a really good sport, the way he took the loss. Because I'll tell you what, if I was his strength, if I lost to someone like me, I wouldn't be happy. And yeah, obviously the team was very nice to me. We had a nice bottle of wine afterwards just to relax, and yeah, it felt good. But I think it just shows you that the classical Dutch has a lot more potential than people give it credit for. And if you can beat the world championships finalist with this opening with black, and this is something that Anand did not manage to do, then this opening should be looked at, treated more seriously. But keep an eye out for my forthcoming book that will have all these secrets and all these games in it. Hope you enjoyed that. Please feel free to leave any comments, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.